Okay, so yeah, I wanted to do background research on the history of abortion, so that way I could better understand the topic for myself. Um, and I actually came across a lot of interesting information. Obviously, I'm not a historian, so I don't have the best methodology when it comes to researching. So there's going to be things that I miss. There's still things that I actually don't know, and I'm going to try like things that I'm unsure about. I'm going to try to clarify as I go through it, because there are things I'm unclear about. But I wanted to kind of do this for myself more than anything. So took some notes. And some of this information was I found very interesting actually, and I'm gonna go through it kind of like a timeline here. Okay. So the first evidence that we really have of abortion was in ancient Egypt. This was about 3,600 years ago. This is during the era of the New Kingdom. This is like the first time abortion was really evidenced was in Egypt around this time. But the earliest like death penalty charges in relation to abortion is evidenced the Assyrian law about 3,096 years ago, and this is like the tablet in this one. So I guess in this, there's actually laws against abortion, and this law was imposed on women who sought abortion against their husband's wishes. So this was like 1,075 BCE, about 3,100 years ago. And then we have another account of abortion actually in the Ramayana of all places. This is an ancient Indian or text of India. Is that how it was? Indian text? Yeah, this is an ancient Indian text, and surprisingly, I don't know for sure, but I believe Hinduism is actually like um, pro-life. I think Hindus for the most part take a pro-life position, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong on that. So the ancient techniques. Oh, I had pictures. To cover the pictures, but okay. So I think we all kind of know what these are. The ancient techniques. They included strenuous labor, fasting, bloodletting, hot baths, beating, obviously. But in ancient medical texts, there's not much evidence of surgical procedures. Um, I mean, I feel like that's fairly obvious. I don't think they would really know how to go about performing that. But as science begins to move forward and medicine makes progress, we kind of move into the Greco-Roman period, about 2,000, like 821 to 1,421 years ago. Um, this is like the Greco-Roman period. Abortion itself was actually relatively normalized, but for midwives and well-informed people, it wasn't something that was generally frowned upon. Um, but it, and I say generally very loosely because it could still be looked at as a moral, or I guess it could still be looked at as a crime against the husband because the unborn child could have claimed his estate, but it wasn't much penalty involved, as even though socially it wasn't really looked at as like a positive thing. So Aristotle is actually quoted as saying that he considered the embryo to gain the human soul at 40 days if male, and 90 days if female. I don't know how you would measure um, that distinction, but he said that before the souls enter the body, we actually had vegetable and animal souls. Which I mean, I find it's an interesting concept, but I wonder if you had a vegetable soul, are you gonna be male, and an animal soul? Like, I don't know exactly how you. It's Aristotle. Um, but so Aristotle um, was typically he would be considered like I guess a pro-choice um, person. He didn't really consider the fetus to be like of human life. Uh, this guy that we all know well in or love, I guess, Hippocrates. He's the one that is kind of I guess the Hippocratic Oath is kind of like cited to him. He was actually he actually prescribed against abortion. This is around the same time because mainly because of the dangers involved with the procedure. So I believe in the Hippocratic Oath, like it's actually prescribes against abortion. But there was another physician at the time actually called a lesser known physician. His name was Serranus, and he is coined with writing the work Gynecology. He actually would perform abortions, and he kind of acknowledged the difference between the people who followed kind of like the Hippocratic convention at the time, the ones that would not give abortions, and the difference between the physicians that would. Um, so this is the physician at the time that actually would do them. So then we move kind of into the Roman Republic, and abortion in the Roman Republic was viewed as a violation of the father's rights to dispose of his offspring. So it was another kind of socially immoral thing to do, although it wasn't directly legislated against. That is until around 2011. Where is it? Around 2011 CE or AD, same thing. Septus Severus became the Roman emperor, and he, along with, I don't know how to say his name, Caracalla, they actually, oh yeah, they have co-emperors here. So yeah, they actually banned abortion, and this was due to the large influence of, or the spreading influence of Christianity. Um, but because of the largely stoic nature of Roman society, at least at this time, this was something that was very hard to enforce. But this is when we really start to see the influence of religion kind of supersede a lot of like those kind of stoic leanings, because obviously as we move forward in time, this belief that Christianity kind of embeds when it comes to the sanctity of life really does become like the bedrock of arguments against abortion. But what's interesting about Christianity, and I want to put this, is that in Numbers 5:11 through 31, it's actually says something very interesting, and I'm going to paraphrase. It basically says that if a man is suspicious of his wife's infidelity, he is to take her to a high priest who would make a substance for her to drink. If she had been unfaithful, she would miscarry. If innocent, there would be no effect. So this 5:11 through 31 is an example of the Bible, God, Jesus, actually promoting abortion, actually prescribing abortion, like as a something to do if you think that your wife has been cheating on you. So I honestly don't fully understand how the Christian position is one of it's a pro-choice one when we have this, but regardless, we start to see an increased push towards criminalization. So in order to understand criminalization, I think I found that I had to kind of understand a concept called quickening. And to be honest, this is a concept that I don't even fully comprehend right now. It seems like a simple concept, right? Quickening is defined as the first movements of the fetus felt in utero. So the first time you feel the baby inside you, that can be referred to as quickening. Typically within the 18th to 20th week of pregnancy. But the reason why I say I don't really understand it is because, and this is where I genuinely have like a hole in a hole in information. So I was trying to figure out exactly from what I was talking about for the Roman period up into the 19th century, what was like the common feelings towards abortion. Couldn't really get a lot of information. I think that from that time period up into the 18th century, it was very much a cultural thing. Like it was very much based on the society that your direct kind of how do I put this? Your direct kind of community. So I think in common law, there was no there's not like legislation that made it illegal, but and this is kind of an intuitive feeling. This is where I could actually use a lot of like feedback. Is I feel like just because we don't have a lot of evidence of it being like directly legislated against until the 19th century, I feel like there was still a lot of like probably a lot of domestic violence cases, a lot of unjust kind of court rulings. Um, but the reason why I make this clarification is because when I was doing research, all I could really get was that okay, in common law it was illegal up into the quickening. So if you had an abortion in the first 18 to 20th weeks of pregnancy before you felt the baby, um, this was socially looked at as it, obviously you can make more arguments against it, but there was no real condemnation. But then after quickening, once it was became apparent that you're pregnant, abortions after that seem to have been much more heavily ridiculed, much more heavily prosecuted, even though there was no real legislation. But I could use more information on that because that is a hole in my knowledge up until the 18th century. So I'm gonna move on to the 18th century, 18th century, or sorry, 19th century. I'm so sorry, confused. So up the 19th century, when I was doing research on this, I found this very, very interesting. So when we first start to see like a push for abortion legislation, um, it's actually being pushed by physicians and leading and like the American Medical Association, and like a lot of this kind of stemmed from a justification about the quickening. So physicians, as we got more knowledge about how the body works and physiology, physicians started to make the argument that if you condemn abortion pre-quickening or post-quickening, so if you condemned a woman for having abortion after they knew that they were pregnant or after they felt the movement, then you should also condemn that action pre-quickening, because to the physician it became apparent that there wasn't they didn't really have take the individual steps of gestation as having being more important than the other. So to them it became apparent that these were just kind of like domino effect causal chains. So their argument was basically that um, quickening, if you're against abortion after the quickening, then to be consistent, you should be against abortion before quickening. And this, because a lot of physicians actually took this position, and I kind of think the Hippocratic Oath kind of had a lot of influence on this. A lot of the people that would actually perform abortions didn't have, they weren't licensed, they weren't associated with any medical societies. So it became very, very easy to actually demonize the practice. And the first law explicitly banning abortion was this one, very wordy, super wordy, but it can be known as the Malicious Shooting or Stabbing Act of 1803. This law, so we can read a little bit here. It says, this is part 2 of it. And this is very annoying to read because like it's basic. There's no periods. It's all just a bunch of commas. But so with intent thereby to cause the miscarriage of any woman not being approved to be quick with child at the time of administering such things or using such means, that then and in every such case the person or persons so offending, their counselors, aiders and abettors, knowing of and being privy to such offense, shall be and are hereby declared to be guilty of felony, and shall be liable to be fined, imprisoned, set in and upon the pillory, publicly or privately whipped, or to suffer one or more of the following said punishments: to be transported beyond the states for any term not exceeding 14 years, at the discretion of the court before which such offender shall be tried and convicted. So this is when we first see like actually strict abortion laws being implemented. But the thing that they don't tell you about this is that they actually did enforce the death penalty for this also. Side note. So in America, there was very little regulation, because this was actually in this wasn't in America. This was in England, I believe. But in America, there was very little regulation until the 1820s. And by the late 60s, anti-abortion advocacy began to rise by the hands of legislators, doctors, American Medical Association, But at the same time, during the late 1860s, abortion services were available in New York, New Orleans, Cincinnati, Louisville, Cleveland, Chicago, and Indianapolis. But then we see in 1873, Comstock, what's known as the Anthony Comstock Chastity Laws. This is when we see a push for this. And basically, what happened here is it became prohibited to produce and publish any information pertaining to abortion. So this actually resulted in an anti-abortion advertising campaign that became very effective. And I just want to show one of those ads. This is actually a woman who would give abortions. Her name was Madame Restel, I believe. Yeah, Madame Restel. And just look at the imagery here. This isn't like necessarily this ad wasn't like a propaganda piece of the Comstock law, but I just want to give this like piece of advertising as kind of just a visual. So like what the kind of attitudes that were kind of prevailing. I look how demonizing this image really is. The female abortionist. So by the 1920s, victories in the areas such as like birth control, they propelled the feminist movement towards liberating abortion laws. And if we're going to talk about the beginning of the pro-choice movement, we have to talk about birth control. We have to talk about the woman who led the charge when it comes to birth control. Very controversial woman. She founded Planned Parenthood. Her name is Margaret Sanger. So Margaret Sanger, she was the founder of the Planned Parenthood organization. Margaret Sanger is a very controversial figure because a lot of the logic she used when it comes to birth control was based in eugenics. This is documented. She spoke with the KKK. KKK had multiple speeches about like her eugenics kind of ideology. So Margaret Sanger believed that society should do its best to eliminate those that are unfit. That's a basic eugenic, precept. And she was in that. So a lot of her motivations and logic she used when it comes to birth control really centered around her view for society having no people with disabilities, physical disabilities, mental disabilities, anyone that wasn't deemed fit for no proper society in her view could be justifiably kind of corrected for through her Planned Parenthood advocacy. That being said, the Planned Parenthood organization itself has distanced themselves from Sanger, and I think that it's very important to note to separate the organization's work from the founder's ideology. Like just because she believed this was her motivations behind starting this, does not mean that the people inside the organization agree with her. I think that's very important to put. But I wanted to play this because I want to play this for multiple reasons actually. I might need to rephrase. So for multiple reasons actually. As much as I disagree with Sanger's eugenic ideology, she was actually very insightful in a lot of different ways. one of those ways was actually in her analysis about the role of religion in the context of this discussion. So I want to play this first because this is actually this was in 2015. There was a museum that actually displayed Margaret's picture as a bust, and some black protesters, priests, sorry, not protesters, black priests came in to protest the event. So I'm gonna play that, and then I kind of want to play Margaret's. There's a clip of Margaret actually talking about her views on the impact of religion as it comes to the issue of birth control.
Black pastors demand the removal of a bust of Planned Parenthood's founder from a Washington museum. The National Portrait Gallery says it won't do it. Jason Calvi is there tonight with that story.
Brian, Margaret Sanger was a pioneer of the birth control movement. She also supported eugenics, the idea to limit reproduction for prisoners and others. Today, a group of pastors say she wanted to use eugenics to limit the black community. So today, they're asking this famous gallery to get rid of her image.
So yeah, that's another thing about Sanger is that a lot of people believe that she was racist. I did a lot of research on this, and I couldn't find anything like of her explicitly using racist language. That being said, most people that actually promote eugenic ideologies are racist. So if something does come out that definitively proves that she was racist, I would not be surprised at all. I can only say that from what I did research about Margaret, I didn't see her explicitly state anything racist, but I could have easily missed it, and I would not be surprised because most eugenicists are in fact racist.
The bus gotta go.
Black pastors and pro-life leaders rally outside the National Portrait Gallery. They want a bust of Margaret Sanger removed from a permanent exhibit.
I think that adds insult to injury that Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, is in the Hall of Justice when she's the founder of an abortion chain that's killed millions upon millions of children.
Exterminate the Negro population.
Protestant Bishop E.W. Jackson led today's charge.
Well, Margaret Sanger was, frankly, a blatant racist who devalued human life and thought that there were people who weren't worthy of life. And she said that on many occasions.
Pro-life activist Ryan Baumberger points to Sanger's autobiography and a speech she gave to the KKK.
I don't know how you can possibly say someone is not racist that actually speaks at a KKK rally. Try that today. See that's
a good point.
How that goes for you.
The Portrait Gallery says it's their job to tell the American story, which includes Sanger.
She is not in the museum in an unqualified way. We talk about her role in the women's rights movements, but we also recognize that there's less than admirable aspects to her career and her involvement in the eugenics movement.
Okay, folks, we're going to the bus.
But for these pastors, that's not good enough. They dropped off a petition signed by 14,000 people.
Because we're not going to rest until the bust is removed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Planned Parenthood is under fire.
Okay, so a couple things I want to say about that. So yeah, Margaret Sanger is believed to be, by obviously her involvement with the Planned Parenthood organization is a very cogent talking point for right-leaning people in their arguments against abortion, particularly for minorities, because Margaret Sanger's eugenic ideology is believed to have disproportionately affected marginalized communities, which gives more evidence into her potentially being a racist, and it definitely gives I guess people on the right a stronger argument against I guess the organization if they were to link the founder with it. Another thing I wanted to say is that, yeah, this is obviously a right-wing organization. Their intent behind taking this bust, I don't think necessarily was for historical accuracy. I think it was to make a point about abortion in general. I think that was their motivation behind doing this. That being said, it's what the museum coordinator actually said, I think it's very important. I think that it's important. I disagree with Margaret on her eugenics position adamantly, but that's not to discredit the work that she did for women and the work that, without Margaret Sanger, the push for safe and reliable birth control would have taken much longer. I think it's important to give her credit where credit's due. I can do that while condemning things that I disagree with her, and I feel like that's completely coherent. But I wanted to give, because these were actually priests. This was kind of a religious. There was a religious objection here too. I wanted to give Margaret's. I wanted to let Margaret kind of talk to herself, or talk for herself on the topic of religion a little bit, just so we can get an idea also of Margaret's kind of personality. Like, I don't want to just put her on fire right now. So let's listen to this. This is a very old interview, 1957.
You say that originally the opposition was in all law, and you have to fight against that. Today, your opposition stems mainly from where? From what source?
Well, I think that the opposition is mainly from the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church.
Of the church. Well, now
hierarchy.
Of the hierarchy of the church. You feel that the parishioners themselves, the lay people in the church, are not against birth control?
I feel they come to all of our clinics just the same as the non-Catholics do. Exactly the same.
Well, let's look at the official Catholic position, opposition to birth control. I read now from a church publication called The Question Box. In forbidding birth control, it says the following. It says, the immediate purpose and primary end of marriage is the begetting of children. When the marital relation is so used as to render the fulfillment of its purposes impossible, that is by birth control, it is used unethically and unnaturally. Now, what's wrong with that position?
Well, it's very wrong. It's not normal. It's not, it has the wrong attitude toward marriage, toward love, toward the relationships between men and women.
Well, the natural law, they say, is that, first of all, the primary function of sex in marriage is to beget children.
Well,
do you disagree with that?
I disagree with it 100%.
Your feeling is what, then?
My feeling is love and the attraction between men and women. In many cases, the very finest relationship has nothing to do with bearing a child. It's secondary. Many, many times we know that. You see your birth rate, you talk to people who have very happy marriages and they're not having babies every year. Yes, I think that's a celibate attitude. Surely.
A celibate attitude, but you agree that Catholicism, according to the tenets of Catholicism, they rule that birth control violates not only the church's position, it isn't the church's position, but they say that it violates a natural law, as I have just explained. Therefore, birth control is a sin, no matter who...
So, actually, looking back at this is actually really cool. This is what Rebecca was saying, actually, is that, like, somehow birth control is violating the natural law.
Just a second. Now, the violation of the natural law, according, you certainly can take no issue with the natural law as the hierarchy of the Catholic Church regards it.
Well, I certainly do take issue with it. I think it's untrue, and I think it's unnatural.
Well, let me ask you...
Everything bears it out that it's an unnatural attitude to take. And how do they know? I mean, after all, they're celibates. They don't know love. They don't know marriage. They know nothing about bringing up children or any of the marriage problems of life. And yet they speak to people as if they were God.
Let me ask you this question. Suppose a healthy, a well-to-do couple decide for some reason never to have children, use birth control all their lives. Would you say that your methods are being misused, Mrs. Sanger?
Now, if they were intelligent people and they had some reason for thinking of children as a responsibility, or some disease that they might have that they wouldn't like to pass on to a child, and I think it would be a very unselfish attitude for them to take if there is a disease.
No, I say a healthy, well-to-do couple, a couple that just doesn't want children, and for that reason they use birth control all the way. Well, do you think that that is a misuse of your methods?
I don't think it's a misuse. I think if they're intelligent adults, but they must know what they want. They must manage their lives themselves. And certainly there's nothing in birth control than there is in other things that you might deny yourself.
I've asked you your motives a little while ago at the beginning of the program.
Okay, so I personally I find Margaret to be like a very intelligent woman. Like this is what's kind of frustrating. It frustrates me a little bit about Margaret is because obviously her viewpoint on society, the prescription that she makes about how society should treat people that are disabled or people that I guess she would deem unfit. I think that's a very extreme position to take, and I'm not comfortable with that at all. That being said, I think that her views on a lot of like issues pertaining to women, I think that she's very insightful, especially like for her time. I think that she was. It doesn't surprise me that she was as popular as she was at all, because I think that if you look at the context of the conversation at this time, I think that she was very forward thinking in the way that she approached. I guess I would say pregnancy. Specifically, and abortion specifically. That being said, obviously maybe too forward thinking with her eugenics thing. Like maybe she overstepped for sure. But I don't want to take away from her her work and her intelligence. I don't want to insult her intelligence either, because she's not here to defend herself either in 2021. So, but this being said, so actually, this is a great kind of segue, because what I found really interesting is when I was looking at the early 19th century here, or I guess with Margaret, we can talk about the introduction, or like the feminist movement really taking root in America. And one thing I didn't realize about the feminist movement really was a lot of the what would be called cultural feminists, I suppose, like the first advocates in this movement. They were actually anti-abortion. This was something that like threw me off guard completely. I was like, what? But they had a very critical. They're anti-abortion, but for an interesting reason. So people like Susan B. Anthony, she's credited as being anti-abortion, or at very least critical of abortion. Alice Paul, their position was basically that abortion is a result of men's sexual irresponsibility and the lack for them to respect a woman's right to abstinence. So the need to abort was likely the cause of marital rape and the seduction of unmarried women. So to them, they viewed the act of wanting an abortion as a broader fault of society, particularly patriarchal attitudes. I guess systemic patriarchal attitudes in society. This was heavily contrasted by, so like this is what was kind of termed cultural feminism, and this was kind of contrasted by socialist feminists. So looking into this, I found it very interesting that there was like this kind of dichotomy. There was, I guess in my view, would be named kind of more. Here, actually, we'll just read their distinction here. So, socialist feminism has often been compared to cultural feminism, but they are quite different, although there are similarities. Cultural feminism focuses almost exclusively on the unique traits and accomplishments of the female gender in opposition to those of men. Separatism is a key theme, but socialist feminism opposes this. The goal of socialist feminism is to work with men to achieve a level playing field for both genders. Socialist feminists have referred to cultural feminism as pretentious. So socialist feminists, people like Mary Equi, that's not how you say her last name, and like William J. Robinson, they actually performed low-cost or free abortions for poor women, as opposed to cultural feminists who would actually advocate against abortion and lean more towards, just appropriate child rearing kind of government institutions to help women through the process of pregnancy. And then the socialist feminists were much more sympathetic towards poor women who needed abortion for any given reason. So that distinction I found very interesting just within the feminist movement. it was kind of cool to understand that it wasn't just like a monolith, which is obviously the case. So it was kind of cool to see the kind of the critical argument, and then the socialist argument too. Like, it was kind of cool, for me at least. But in 1963, the Society for Humane Abortion was formed in the U.S. So that kind of that was in contrast to those Comstock laws, to where like we couldn't even publish anything on abortion. So we started to actually get information about how to perform and obtain an abortion like safely. That became more and more common knowledge. And a really cool story actually, in Chicago, there was a group. They called it the Jane Collective. It was run by this woman, Heather Booth. The Jane Collective was actually a really cool kind of a collective in Chicago, that if you saw an abortion, for a woman seeking an abortion, you would call a designated number and they would tell you where to find Jane. I just thought it was like really cool. It's kind of like an underground like abortion, what do you call it, like a floating abortion clinic. It was kind of cool. It was a cool story. One person that, besides Heather Booth, that I really wanted to mention that I didn't previously, was this woman. Her name was Stella Brown. Stella Brown was one of the leading figures in the women's movement. She actually, in 1929, she brought a lecture forward to the Sexual Reform Congress in London. The lecture was called "The Right to Abortion," and at this time, like we're talking 1929, this was groundbreaking. I think she had a massive role in shifting the, I guess, cultural paradigm when it comes to women's rights in general. So I give a lot of credit to Stella Brown. Anyway, at this point, we're in like the late 60s and 70s. We saw like a massive shift in the perspectives. And again, I'm sorry if I'm butchering this. A lot of this information is more for me, and I just need feedback. I would really appreciate to have a conversation about this, like with someone who's actually really well read in the future. But I'm just doing this for myself. So from what I understand, through the late 60s and the 70s, we saw a massive shift in perspectives of medical professionals as well. This is because most of these organizations actually wanted to protect doctors from criminal, I guess, prosecution. So throughout the whole nation, we just see a shift of attitude when it comes to abortion. This is in the wake of a lot of the work that cultural and socialist feminists are doing at the time. So then in '73, that's when we see this landmark case, the Roe v. Wade. This is when Roe v. Wade kind of hits the scene, right? So this ruled that a Texas statute forbidding abortion unless necessary to save a woman's life was unconstitutional. I believe they're referring to the original Heartbeat Act. I believe, but there was a statute that was forbidding abortion except when necessary to save a woman's life. The Supreme Court ruled that was unconstitutional. So they actually gave women the right to an abortion until viability, which would be determined by a doctor. After viability, a woman could still obtain an abortion for health reasons. These reasons included psychological well-being. So this effectively legalized abortions throughout the country. So what we can do here, actually, just for a little bit of historical reference, you can listen to like just a minute of the opening of the Roe v. Wade case, actually.
We'll hear arguments in number 18, Roe against Wade.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. The instant case is a appeal from a decision of the United States District Court for the Northern District of Texas. The court declared the Texas abortion law to be unconstitutional for two reasons. First, that the law was impermissibly vague, and second, that it violated a woman's right to determine to continue or terminate a pregnancy. Although the court granted declaratory relief, the court denied appellant's request for injunctive relief. The Texas law in question permits abortions to be performed only in instances where is for the purpose of saving the life of the woman. The case originated with the filing of two separate complaints, the first being filed on behalf of Jane Roe, an unmarried pregnant girl, and the second being filed on behalf of Jane and Mary Doe.
Okay, we can't go through this whole thing. Obviously, there's a lot here. But yeah, so the ruling came down, and it gave women the right to abortion, basically. Then what happened most recently in Texas, what's hot on the presses, is, this SB 8. And this basically reenacts like the whole heartbeat law. But this time, if you were to offer an abortion or abet in the process of having an abortion after a 6-week period, any citizen of the state can sue you for doing so, and you're expected to pay. I mean, for the litigation and everything. Like, so here, what I found really interesting is the child's heartbeat. To me, this seems like a modern kind of way of interpreting quickening. So now we just, instead of saying, the first movements, we say, when we can detect. Oops, where was that? We say when we can detect the heartbeat. So to me, I just found it interesting that it's just as archaic as like the whole quickening. But obviously, there's a lot of problems with this. I mean, most women don't even know they're pregnant in the first six weeks. Countless amounts of problems. But there's actually multiple states right now. States including Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona, Michigan, Mississippi, Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Wisconsin all have unenforced pre-Roe abortion bans, which could be enforced if Roe were overturned. Or I guess even if something like this was to kind of be implemented towards states like this, we're going to see an inevitable closure of abortion facilities. So much that, like in Texas, this is probably going to lead way, unless something is done, it's probably going to lead way to a lot of these facilities actually being closed down and the service of abortion being virtually non-existent in the state of Texas. And all of these other states are also subject to things like this. So we're seeing kind of a reemergence of abortion legislation, and it feels this is kind of maybe I'm too forward in assuming this, but it feels like we're seeing kind of a reemergence in the influence of Christianity when it comes to politics in general, and religion. It seems like for whatever reason, you could say Trump, you can even say maybe Biden, maybe like it's a reaction to Biden, maybe it was before that. For whatever reason, religion, specifically Christianity, is something that is the ideology kind of imbued within Christianity is something that we're seeing being pushed into legislation again, which we've always seen this happen, but it feels like now we're seeing kind of a reemergence of like a lot of the motivations behind religious people getting into politics because of religious reasons. So like, it feels like to me a lot of right-leaning people and like Republicans are kind of on defense when it comes to what's happening in today's society. So they're creating kind of reactionary bills like this and ultimately regressive bills as a way of preserving an ideology that they feel like is being lost. So like their way of preserving this ideology is actually to continue to enforce it through legislation. And that's kind of scary, because specifically with the abortion issue, what's kind of important, I didn't realize it was as important as it was until I kind of like did a lot of this research, is little things like the idea of like contraception, right? So I want to talk about contraception a little bit. So let's just look at these. We have the birth control pill. That's one contraceptive method for a woman. We have IUD, another contraceptive method for a woman. Birth control shot, believe that's another one for a woman. Male condom, that's male's contraceptive. Diaphragm, another female. Spermicide, I guess male. Cervical cap, female, female, female. So we have all of these different contraceptive options for women, right? Seems cool, right? We have so many options. But if you look at this, the only ones that really don't have negative side effects are the female condom, which, I mean, let's be real, no one argued, I don't even think women like to use it. I mean, to me, it feels like maybe it should be taken more seriously, things like the female condom, but socially, it's not really used that much. And then the IUD. When I was doing research, this implantable device had the least amount of side effects also. But that being said, this was one of the most invasive procedures because you're literally putting something into your body. So the point I'm trying to make with contraceptives is that it's been focused, when we look at the male side, we literally have just the condom and the spermicide. So it feels like the push, and this is just like an intuitive thing, there is kind of an intuitive feeling that a push for a pro-life position, I am sympathetic to the idea that there's a lot of how do I put this kindly, there's a lot of kind of misogyny and patriarchal tendencies kind of embedded within the ideology that I guess would promote a pro-life position. And to me, that's because of how seeped it is in religion. When I was talking to a lot of these people about the pro-life stance, it was very hard to separate their beliefs in regards to the sanctity of life with the value they put on their religion, Christianity specifically. And then when you look at the Christianity and you look at their perception of women, and specifically when you look at their perception of men, it becomes apparent potential motivations for not doing enough research when it comes to male contraceptives, focusing wholly on trying to find ways to restrain the fertility of a woman. And again, maybe I'm off point with this specific analysis, but to me, I can't help but feel like there was a large, how do I put it? I couldn't help but feel like there was a willingness to control the woman's body, especially from women too. Women were that threw me off too. They were very much in favor of I guess kind of a patriarchal outlook. That's the best way I can really put it, because when I was talking to them, it was very much, the responsibility was very much only on the women's ability to. The only difference I really saw in this was with that argument, to where if you don't want to use any contraceptions, whatsoever, both on the male and women's side, then you should probably, and you don't want children, you should probably be able to communicate very effectively and know when not to actually engage in sex and accept the risks when you do. Obviously, that's a responsible position. But when you're anti-abortion but pro birth control, because of your religion, and that religion being Christianity, it's very hard for me to separate Christianity's just pervasive patriarchal flavoring, I guess. It's very hard for me to separate that with the push for I guess the ability to not allow women the autonomous choice of an abortion, and then forcing them into a position to where they need to use birth control. and then saying that like that birth control itself is like unnatural too, like then you need to do all of this other stuff. It seems like it's very much placating to men in society. Like that's the best way I can really put it. And then when I was doing research on male contraceptives, it became apparent that we just haven't done enough research. So like the only options that we really have are spermicide, male condom, and a vasectomy. So, and obviously a vasectomy isn't like a practical solution to male birth control. So the only options that we really have are like the male condom, spermicide. But that being said, there is a pill in the work for anyone interested. It passed tests 2019. I have to follow up, see exactly where it's at, but it seems like we're kind of getting past, at least science has kind of got past like that patriarchal inclination. Finally, I mean, I guess it took long enough, but yeah, so now there is a male birth control pill option in the work. And again, when I'm talking about contraception, this is still like a very fresh idea to me. I'm just really trying to articulate the fact that it felt like it feels like the pro-life position to me is just very restrictive on the freedoms and the autonomy of women. So I'm like I'm trying to understand why exactly someone would promote an ideology like that, and the only way it makes sense is through the lens of Christianity. So that's all I mean by that. But all this being said, there's an option for men being test run, I guess, when it comes to birth control. So that should be interesting. This seems like, you know, another kind of an important step in the conversation about Planned Parenting, I guess, in general. Yeah, so what I've kind of learned, I guess, when it comes to abortion so far, and I'm still learning, so this is still a work in progress, but if I was to kind of sum up what I've gotten from this experience so far, it's that there in the differences between a pro-choice position and a pro-life position really comes down to a question of like liberalism. So the pro-life position is very comfortable with saying that they know that society should legislate against the act of abortion, and that in doing so, it's definitively helping all women. It's definitively that if we were to ban abortion, and I'll be generous, if we were to ban abortion and increase parental help, I guess institutions that are kind of formed to help parents, if we were to strengthen those, that society would be better off, because they believe that allowing abortion in society promotes irresponsibility when it comes to the act of pregnancy. So they believe that it also kind of perpetuates false perceptions of love, because, you know, if you have a kid, you can just abort it. I think that, like, they're very big on commitment. So yeah, I guess the right-wing position when it comes to abortion is very comfortable with making like these statements and then prescribing them onto society as a whole, and saying that if these things were implemented, they should be implemented, and if they were, society would be better. And the pro-choice position looks at what could be potentially, or looks at the reality of situations that women face on a day-to-day basis, and tries to accommodate for and make up for the potential suffering that occurs. So, pro-life position, if there's a woman that's contemplating abortion, let's say that she was say that she was raped and she feels like she needs to get an abortion. The pro-life position would say that she doesn't know what's good for her. That if her getting an abortion actually harms, it's not unbeknownst to her, it harms society because she is taking a life that could have added value to society away. They see it as very selfish. And then a pro-choice position would see that woman's life as they wouldn't make the statement that she does not know what she's doing. Basically, they would say that as a rational actor, she's doing what is best for her in that given circumstance, and that she does know what's best for her. So I guess the pro-choice position would be like that women are capable, as pertains to abortion, they are capable of knowing what's best for them, whether that be getting an abortion or not. Whereas the pro-life position states that a woman who seeks an abortion is unaware of certain variables that if she was aware of, that she would change her mind because it is objectively better for her and society that she does have the baby, regardless of the circumstances of the pregnancy. Yeah, and I think obviously I want some feedback on like that analysis there, but I think that's where I'm at with the differences here. I think that the pro-choice position states that women who have to make this decision, they make it with the full knowledge of why they're going to do it. They approach this decision with knowledge, and the pro-life position seems like they're saying that women approach this decision with knowledge, without some knowledge. Like if they were to be given an ultrasound, if they were to be, if a counselor was to talk to them, if something was to happen, like they would realize that it's for their betterment and betterment of society. So as harsh as that may be, like it's just kind of how it feels like to me. It feels like right-wing position is stating that women don't really know what's best for them. If you're thinking about abortion, you just don't really know what's best for you. There's pro-choice saying that if you make that decision, chances are you know what's best for you. You know what's best for your life and your body. And yeah. I think it's a very complex conversation, and it feels like this conversation is gonna be going on still. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we've solved much. It's not to say we haven't made great strides when it comes to women's rights, because we've made tremendous strides when it comes to the rights of women, and we're continuing to do so. Today's society is magnitudes better for women than past societies. Like, and I'm definitely proud to be a part of that. I'm definitely proud to be a part of a generation that I feel like in general has a sense of respect for women. At very least, I feel like this generation and generations coming up have much more respect for women and women's role in society than past generations have. So I'm very proud of that, and I'm hoping that we can use the momentum of history and the momentum of now to really capitalize on the improvements that we made, and we can continue to move forward. And hopefully things like this, this Texas legislation and stuff are just hiccups, because all of us, and now I will say that I am right, and I hold a pro-choice position, and I think that all of us, like, holding a pro-choice position, like, we would like to see women be able to make decisions like this without having to feel pressured culturally by any religion, any government institution, any media presence. Like, I would like to see a future where issues like abortion aren't stigmatized for women. and we're not made to demonize people who have to make such a important decision in their life. Unfortunately, I don't know if I'm going to be alive to see that day, but hopefully it does happen.